to the Classic City Sports Podcast.
And McAllister down the left field line. Connor Tate is going to round third. He will score. And rounding third is Blaylock. He will score. And the Dogs walk it off.
If you're looking for the latest Georgia Bulldog news in football, basketball, baseball, and recruiting, then you are in the right place.
It's third down, Bryce Young's career. You need 10, play clock at 4. From the pocket, launching downfield, underthrown and intercepted. Keely Ringo has an escort down the sidelines. All the way to the end zone, and Georgia is going to conquer the Crimson Tide.
Hosted by Jeremiah Stoddard and Jonathan Williams.
Georgia on the mountaintop. Demons be gone, and the drought is over. National champions at long last.
Just sit back, relax, and prepare yourself for these hot takes you're about to listen to.
All right, welcome back to another episode of Classic City Sports Podcast. As been the theme for the off season, it's a weird time on a Sunday for us to be doing it, but we're just trying to make everything work with schedules. So trying to get some content out. Hope everybody's having a great Sunday so far. Jonathan, how are we feeling so far on this beautiful Sunday? It's nice and sunny out here in Athens.
Oh, yeah, it's fantastic. You know, good way to spend my last day of spring break. Fortunately, I have to go back to school this week. Georgia, for some reason, you know, it seems like their spring break gets earlier and earlier. So first week of March, that's when we had our spring break. But a good time because that means spring practice is now here starting out this week. I think Pro Day is on Wednesday as well this week. So a lot of news happening in regards to Georgia football this week. But, man, it's great. Finally glad that the weather is warming up. Finally glad that we're getting into this spring weather because I can only do so much of the cold.
Yeah. I'm like in the sun today after the past couple of days. We've had so much rain and gloominess and stuff. Nice sunny Sunday here for us, so it's nice as well. But like you just mentioned, we've got spring practice just around the corner, starting up this week, and the pro days coming up as well, and then a little bit of a recap from the NFL Combine as well for you guys. But let's go ahead and start with the NFL Combine just for a minute. We won't spend a lot of time on it, but what was your takeaway from the Combine? Was there anybody that kind of did more, maybe left the Combine with a better situation, or maybe somebody did a little bit worse, for their draft stock kind of thing? How did you feel with Georgia's performance at the Combine?
I mean, I thought Tyke and Javon both had great days at the Combine. I think they both ran faster times than what I know for sure what I expected and probably what most people expected out of them to run, especially Tyke. I think Tyke posting the time that he did, I can't remember it off the top of my head right now, but I think that that certainly helped him a lot because I think a lot of the questions that people had for him specifically was that top end speed, especially playing somewhere like the slot corner or star position or nickel back at the NFL level. I think that was a big thing for him. And the same thing for Bullard. I think for those two guys, both of them, speed was maybe one of the few questions that people kind of had about them coming into the draft, and both of them put together really solid times. I thought Mims was going to have a great day. He was on pace to have a great day, going just right over 5 seconds in the 40-yard, and then he ended up getting hurt and wasn't able to finish the rest of his day. So I think the injury there, of course, that kind of go ahead and highlights that injury concern that people kind of had of him already, after coming off that ankle injury. Him getting injured again at the NFL draft, I don't think necessarily helps him, but I don't think he drastically hurt himself by any means at all either. Don't get me wrong. I think he's definitely still going to be a first-round pick. He's definitely still going to be one of the top 6 tackles probably off of the draft board this year. There's a loaded offensive tackle class this year. So being in the top 6 for him is definitely a first-round pick. But outside of that, I wouldn't say anybody really hurt themselves. I think Tyke and Bullard had the best days. I mean, I guess you could say Zion Logue. I mean, it wasn't a great day for him. Really didn't expect a great day for him, but don't know that he did himself really any favors at the NFL Combine.
Yeah, I don't think there was a lot of negatives coming out of it as well. There were a few positive, like you just mentioned. I think another really good one was Ladd. I don't think he shot up a draft board necessarily because we kind of expected him to do what he did. And I think that's the biggest thing was he didn't hurt or help necessarily too much. I think he just kind of confirmed that he should be, in that top 40 pick type range. I know you guys talked about it, and I think his mock draft afterwards was like 37 or something like
Mhm.
that. So I think I think he just kind of locked his spot up where he's supposed to be. I don't think it went up or down. I think it just kind of, he did what he was supposed to do. And I think the guy running as fast as he did, running a sub 4.4, what was it, a 4.39, I think,
Yeah,
and
4.39 official.
which is exactly what you expected, kind of like right around the 4.4 spot. Maybe a 4.42 was expected, but getting the 4.39 to go under that 4.4 second mark is going to make him look good. He competed well for his size and everything as well. Like, it'll be interesting. He's a little taller than I expected him to be.
Mhm.
He measured in at the Senior Bowl as well, and it kind of shocked me. I thought he was more of the 5'10", almost 5'9" range. Because I've been around him in person before, and he didn't look like he carried himself as almost 6 feet, but apparently that's what he's measuring in, is pretty much 6 feet tall, or almost 6 feet tall. Still got
Mhm.
the weight kind of thing going at the 183, 185. So it'll be interesting to see where he goes and what team uses him, because to me it doesn't matter what team gets him. He's going to have success anywhere, because the type of play that he can provide any team is going to be, it's a very utilized position for him. So I'm excited to see what happens with him. But like I said, I don't think he hurt or helped. I think he kind of just locked himself in that spot that we kind of expected him to be in.
Yeah, it seems like there's really only one destination for Lad in the first round, and it's going to be, if someone takes him in the first round, it's going to be the Kansas City Chiefs at 32, just because that kind of fits Kansas City's needs, and that kind of fits his draft projection as well. Lad had a great day. He had a tremendous day, but the only thing is that everybody in that wide receiver room had a great day.
They were running,
I
man.
mean, and
Holy
you look at
crap.
the and despite his performance, I mean, Lad's still like wide receiver 8, wide receiver 7 in this class, and there's just so many great names in this class. Between Marvin Harrison, Rome Odunze, Malik Neighbors. You could keep going down the list. I mean, even Xavier Worthy out of Texas, he had a fantastic day as well. So I mean, but it's really like you have your top 5 guys. A.D. Mitchell, he's definitely in that top 5 range now. I mean, you have your top 5 guys, but once you get outside of the top 5, then you start getting in that conversation of like, if you want to take Lad at 6, if you want him to be the 6th wide receiver off the board, then nobody's going to bat an eye or question that decision. But it's just a matter of if and when, and that's why I kind of think that if he does go in the first round, it's not going to be until the 32nd pick. So I
To
think he's
Kansas
more so
City.
probably going
Yeah.
to be one of those first names out of the second round, because I think Lad would still be classified almost as a steal if you get him in the second round. And he's going to be a player that lasts around in the NFL. I mean, NFL teams seem to really, really like him. So yeah, I don't want people to think that we were saying that Lad had a bad day. I think he had a great day, but he didn't have like a fantastic day compared to all of his peers in that other wide receiver room.
Yeah, I mean, we had guys running what was it, a 4.21? Like
Yeah.
just absolute freak show stuff out there. Yeah, that's gonna pop on paper, obviously.
Hmm.
But with Lad, I think the goal, or the way he gets into that first round for me, is if you see a run on wide receivers in like the 10 to 15 pick area. If you start seeing wide receivers go, then that's when you might see him be able to make it into that first round. Kind of like what we saw when the Falcons took Drake London a couple years ago, and then
Hmm.
immediately there were like 4 wide receivers taken right after that. So there were like 4 or
Yeah.
5 guys within 4 or 5 picks just off the board. And so all of a sudden, then somebody else at wide receiver sneaks into the first round, because there's less options that are first round talents for those guys in the 25 to 30 range of picks. So I think that's when he could get a chance if something like that happened. Or like what you're saying and what Dan is talking about in the comments is, he could go, if without having that happen, the odds are, maybe Kansas City picks him up at 32 and kind of replaces what they need there. So we'll see how it plays out for him. But all in all, I think he did have a good enough day to give himself a chance at a first round. Like you said, with Amarius Mims, same thing could go where it helps him, is if there's a run on offensive tackles early where people go, oh crap, got to take one, and so he can kind of jump up draft boards that way as well. I think he is a first round pick, but maybe he can go a little bit higher if something like that happens. It's all fun to talk about, and it'll be interesting to see how it all plays out. But overall, I think Georgia players did do well at the combine, and it'll be interesting to see where they all find new homes. They're pretty much done with the pre-draft stuff, except the pro day coming up on Wednesday. It'll be interesting to see a few guys that did not run or did not do some stuff at the combine. And so now we get to see them at the Georgia facility doing their pro day to try to, get their draft stock improved that way. So I'm excited to see how that plays out on Wednesday as well.
Yeah, I think everybody's hoping that Brock runs a 40 at the Georgia Pro Day just because everybody wants to see it. I mean, everybody knows that he's fast. We've heard the times and the miles per hour that he's reached at practice at UGA over the years. Everybody knows that he has game speed. That's not a question. But I think everybody just wants to see how fast he is in the 40. So, I mean, I don't know if he is going to run at the UGA Pro Day. I would think that maybe he does, just to maybe have a time by his name. But it's interesting to see that. But, yeah, I mean, talking about going off of runs at certain positions, and especially in this year's draft, like you look at any NFL mock draft right now, it's quarterbacks, it's offensive tackles, it's defensive backs, and then you have some and wide receivers. That's really the only 4 positions that you're seeing. Unless your name is Jared Verse or Dallas Turner, you're not really seeing any of these other positions like edge rushers or linebackers or defensive tackles or anything like
Brock
that. Like
Bowers is going to be the only tight end.
Brock Bowers as a tight end. I mean, really, if you aren't those guys, I mean, if you're not in one of those other position groups, then you're kind of shit out of luck. I mean, I can't even find any other way to say it than that way, just because that's how the draft is shaping up this year. So very easily could just see these runs at these positions, just kind of how draft needs are setting up and based on the teams that have certain picks. Like quarterbacks, I mean, your top 3-4 quarterbacks could be gone within the first 4 picks. Yeah. So if you're not in that range, you might not be getting your quarterback that you're wanting. So definitely interested to see how that goes. Because I think it may just not even end up like that. Maybe it's just completely wrong. NFL mock drafts are just completely wrong, and that's not how the draft goes at all. But how things are shaping up, it's definitely going to be an offensive tackle, quarterback, wide receiver, defensive back heavy first round.
Yeah, and I think that's going to be how it plays out as far as positions go, because we've seen, certain positions that don't really get a lot of love in the first round anymore, running back being one of them. I know the Falcons took Bijan in the top 10 last year, but that was kind of rare in the new age of the NFL football. They don't really take running backs that there won't be. Yeah. And like, you don't really see that and like people don't want to use their first round pick on a running back. And I think the reason for it is because running backs, you can get good running backs in the 3rd round, right? Like you can get a good guy that comes out there and has a 10-year career out of the 3rd round. You don't have to get that running back, but wide receivers and stuff like that, like you've got the best of the best right there and you can't miss them. So you got to take them. Offensive tackle is one of the most important positions on your team. And then obviously quarterbacks being the most important. So like those positions obviously take some precedence there. So it'll be interesting to see how some of it plays out. But yeah, certain positions just don't get a lot of love. But I mean, I do expect those positions to be the ones that are focused on. But as far as where people are going to land, I don't really pay too much attention to mock drafts until we get real close to the actual draft itself. Like within the last 2 weeks, that's when it started, because it changes from what's right now. The same people putting their mock drafts out right now, when we get into about a week in front of it, theirs is going to look so much different. You know what I mean? Like things change, once all these pro days and stuff are done, all of the stuff, like conversations have been had, like moves change. And then also when you get to the actual, draft, you might have a strategy, but guess what? My guy gets taken off 2 picks in front of me, so I can't get him anymore. Now I got to, go either, do I go for that same position and get somebody I think is not necessarily as good, or do I wait for that position now because I think I can get somebody that is as valued where I can get them now versus, maybe early 2nd round or something like that, versus maybe there's a guy at another position that I also need, maybe not my biggest team need, but they're the best player available and I do need that position. So you see those moves, which I think is what could happen with like Brock Bowers. He's sitting on the board, in those top 10 picks, and somebody looks at it and goes, I mean, dude, this guy's good. We do need a tight end on our roster. We don't necessarily need him as much as we need a tackle or we need a quarterback, but we need a tight end and he's the best in the game. So maybe we take him. So it'll be interesting to see how it all plays out, but I'm excited about it. Unless you got anything else on the combine or anything like that, I think we can go ahead and move on to our spring practice preview. We got all the 2024 kids are on campus now. We got a lot of transfers.
Majority of them, yeah.
Well, not all of them, most of them, yeah. That's just how it is now. Most of your class is early enrollees at this point.
I think they had 24 early enrollees, I want to say. I think
that's the thing about it now is like if you decide not to do an early enrollee, maybe you couldn't graduate early or whatever your reason, you can't do it. And so you're late in that class. Unless you're like the Ellis Robinsons or something like that, you're going to be behind, schedule by the time you get into classes or get into the practice facilities this summer or early fall. And now you're kind of playing catch up where other guys at your position have been there for months at this point working, even doing bowl prep before the Orange Bowl. And then, so they know what they're getting into. They know the offense or the defense. They've kind of learned it. And so they got a step ahead of you. So I wonder if it's like you almost have to be an early enrollee to be able to be an impact freshman at this point. I kind of feel like you would have to.
Well, yeah, I mean, you get a head start on everybody
Yeah.
else. You get the whole portion of spring. I mean, spring is arguably the most important time of the year when it comes to development and just kind of getting your feet wet, especially for a freshman. Like I can recall back to the days of like summer basketball in high school. Like if you weren't there all summer, then we don't start practicing again for games until November or late October. Right. And by then it's like we got 2 weeks until we got our first game. So, I mean, you missed out on 2 full months of potential practice and development, just kind of, getting into the playbook a little bit, kind of understanding what the team's mission is this year, kind of what you need to do at your position and whatnot. So if you miss out on that, then, I mean, that's just a huge window of opportunity that you're missing out on. But then again, I mean, you are a freshman. So unless you are someone like Ellis Robinson, you probably aren't going to be playing a good bit. We don't even know if Ellis Robinson is going to be playing all that much.
No, not necessarily.
There's a lot of guys ahead of him on the defensive back room that are still mentally talented and that need playing time and that need to be in that starting rotation. So, I mean, very few freshmen, like, again, bring them into the conversation again. Unless your name is Brock Bowers, I mean, you're really not going to see yourself just starting from game 1 all the way to game 15 if you get to that point.
No, and that position group specifically too is like he's got the best chance because of who he is. I mean, he was the number 2 player in the country and number 1 corner in the country. So obviously there's a lot of eyes on what he's going to do this year. That position group has been it's depleted. Defensive backs as a whole, there's been a lot of names that leave. We just talked about them in the combine and everything like that. So there's a lot of holes to fill. And last year we didn't really have that really good number 2 corner, so we kind of saw Daylen Everette was the number 2 guy and he was sitting there. Mm-hmm. But then late in the season, we started seeing Julian Humphreys get a chance to do something and he looked good. And then he was dealing with some stuff. So it'll be interesting to see how that position group specifically plays out in spring practice, where it does give Ellis a chance to make a wave being at spring practice and being able to go through all that and do G-Day and be able to show his talents early on. I think nobody's questioning his abilities, but it can give him a chance to maybe grab the edge on one of like the older guys that are there because he has time to show what he can do. And one thing we do know about Kirby Smart and that defensive back position over the years, we've always seen the veteran guy get the nod at least in the first game. We've seen it change throughout the season, but that first game, he's usually going to go with, your Daylen Everette, even though some people didn't love Daylen Everette last year. I think he got a lot of hate that wasn't necessarily warranted at times, but he's still a good defensive back. And I think he's going to be on the field on that first snap, against Clemson. And it's just a question mark of who's going to be with him. And can he hold that position throughout the season? That's where you see Kirby Smart make those moves at defensive back, is maybe 4 games in, you start seeing a Julian Humphrey take over for him or something like that because he's caught up and he's shown he can do it. But that first game, I definitely expect Daylen. I don't know who's going to be beside him, but I do expect Daylen to be on the field for that first snap of 2024.
Yeah, I mean, my personal opinion, I think eventually it's going to be Daniel Harris and Julian Humphrey. I think those are the 2 guys that Georgia is going to end up rolling with. But I agree with you. I think Daylen Everette is going to play. I think people, if you're not a fan of him, you need to prepare yourself for that. That 6 is going to be on the field this year. He is going to play, and he's probably going to play more than Ellis Robinson, maybe until like December. I mean, again, Ellis Robinson is a fantastic player. I think he has all of the potential in the world and the ceiling to be the best defensive back to ever come through the University of Georgia, hands down. I mean, he is that type of impact player. But like you just mentioned, I mean, especially for a position like defensive backs, I mean, it's important to go with the guys that have in-game reps, that have the more experience. And so I think that's why it's going to end up eventually being Daniel Harris and Julian Humphrey as your go-to guys. But I think you could really say the defensive back room as a whole is just a position group to watch. I mean, anywhere from star, you got to hope that Jonel Aguero is your guy at star because you really don't have anybody else. You really don't feel like you have any other answers there other than we're hoping that Jonel Aguero is everything that he was advertised coming out of high school going into year 2 for him. And then safety, obviously, Malachi Starks is going to be one of them, but who's going to be beside him? Is it David Daniel Sisavon? Is it going to be Dan Jackson? Probably a mixture of those 2 if I had to guess. Or, Ja'Cory Thomas. I mean, it's a big offseason for him as well. He's got to get into that safety mix as well. But a big question mark there beside Malachi Starks. And, I mean, this is really the first spring in quite some time where we don't know at least the number 1 corner. Like we've always kind of known that there's one guy like Kelee Ringo. We knew that he was going to be the starting defensive back. We just didn't know who was going to be starting alongside next to him. Last year, it was Kamari Lassiter. We don't know who's going to be next to him. And then a couple years before that was, Eric Stokes, Tyson Campbell, or Amir Speed, any of those guys.
Yeah.
Where this year, it's like, it feels like a wide open job. It feels like
It
it's
is.
anybody's for the taking. So I think the defensive back room, just in totality, is a really interesting room to watch.
Well, and to add some names to that safety room that you're talking about as well, that room, it's depleted because you just lost some, some of the better players, at that position. You still have Starks, obviously, but that other side, you got to open. It's an open door for somebody to take it. And you also have Jake Pope transferring in from Alabama. You also have KJ Bolden, a true freshman this year, that's going to be trying to get on the field. So yeah, you might see one of those other guys, David Sisavon or Dan Jackson get some run there early as well. But one of those other two, they're coming in ready to try to, Jake Pope came in to try to get a job. You know what I mean? He's coming there to win a job. And it'll be interesting to see if he's able to do it. Or is KJ Bolden going to be able to get himself on the field early in the season as well? That whole defensive back room is my main focus this year.
Yeah. I'm going to hit on this Dan's comment right here. He says, is it safe to say Aguero is the most disappointing of the group? They tried to say he was right there with Downs. Downs the best player in the country as a freshman. Jonell can't get on the field. All right, I think we need to pump the brakes just a tad bit here. Jonell was a freshman last year. I mean, it was his first year playing, and he was a freshman behind Tyke Smith and Javon Bullard. It was Tyke Smith's job to play at star. That's where they wanted to play Jonell. And I think the only reason why it seemed like Jonell maybe was going to win that job going into the fall is because there was still some questions on, like, can Tyke play? We really hadn't seen it at Georgia yet. And up until that first game, those first few games, that was when we kind of finally got that answer of, okay, Tyke Smith is a dude. He is a starter. He should be our starting star. And then obviously you're not going to take Javon Bullard off of the field. That's why we moved him back to safety so Tyke Smith could play in the box and he could play that star position. So Jonell Aguero is meant to play star. He got some run last year a little bit. Again, he just didn't play any extensive time, just again, because of the guys that were already on the field. And you're not going to put in a freshman over those types of guys. So I think year two, that's when it can be a little bit of a judgment day for Jonell. Like, if he doesn't crack the lineup this year, when it seems like it's his job for the taking there at the star position, then maybe we can have some conversations about him being a disappointment, if you will. But if your measuring stick for anybody is Caleb Downs, you're going to be disappointed every time. I mean, unless your name is Malachi Starks right now, you're not going to find a better safety in all of college football. You're not going to find a better defensive player, arguably, than Caleb Downs right now. So if that's your measuring stick, then you're going to be disappointed every single time.
Well, and Caleb Downs didn't have those same names that you just listed on the field in front of him necessarily. It was a little bit.
Yeah, Alabama
he's
was
obviously
depleted last year.
Yeah, and so he had a more open opportunity to be able to take over. Whereas Aguero, like you just named, he had Javon Bullard and he had Tyke Smith and Malachi Starks. Those three guys were not going to be coming off the field for a true freshman. I don't care how good the true freshman was. They weren't going to come off the field barring injury. Like it's one of those situations where you can be extremely talented on this Georgia roster and still not get to play yet. You got to wait your turn. We've seen that with so many players that have come through Athens. We've seen players wait 2-3 years and then still be a star in their fourth year or their last year of their chance. And they were on the bench for so long. What's because of the people in front of them? So I think you got to give him this year. Now, like you said, if he doesn't do something this year, and it seems like the door's open for him to take that star position and he should be on the field, then yeah, we'll see what happens, but I do think he's going to have a good year coming up this year as well. So I'm excited to see it. So we talked about defensive backs. Is there another position group that you are really focused on? Not necessarily, or a certain player. You can talk about a certain player if you want as well, but like a position group or something you're looking at in Athens this spring to really stand out and see how it shakes out.
I guess I need to clear. I'll hit on this question, Jeremiah. I guess I need to clear something up. Dan says, so it's your thoughts that Downs wouldn't have played at Georgia? No, that's not what I'm saying at all. I just said that Downs is arguably one of the best defensive players in all of college football. So yes, he would have played. My argument is that you can't measure everybody to Caleb Downs, because if that's your measuring stick for everybody, then you're going to be disappointed every single time. Just like it's going to happen. Every tight end now that comes through Georgia is going to be measured through Brock Bowers. And that's not fair to every single tight end that comes through Georgia. Not everybody is built like Brock Bowers. Not everybody is built like Caleb Downs. Not everybody is built like Malachi Starks. I mean, it's just like you can't compare everybody to one of the best in the game. You know, we can't compare every single basketball player to LeBron James or Michael Jordan. That's just not fair. But if Caleb Downs came here, then yeah, you would have put Caleb Downs on the field. I'm just saying it's not fair for us to sit here and say, well, Jonell Aguero is disappointed because other people were comparing him to Caleb Downs and saying that he was equatable to him. That's not fair to do to players. So just because that Jonell Aguero isn't as good as Caleb Downs doesn't mean that we need to be labeling him as a disappointment. Yeah, that's all. That's the only point I was trying to make.
And he's
Other
still got
position
time
groups.
to make his name for himself as well.
Yeah,
Just because he didn't start as a freshman doesn't mean he's not gonna come and have a really good career at Georgia as well. Maybe not
exactly.
Caleb Downs being, probably a top 15 pick in the NFL draft when he leaves, but, it's still he could put himself in the second round, even the first round if he does have a great career. You never know.
Yeah, absolutely. As far as other position groups, I'm really interested. I mean, wide receiver, I feel like that's another group where you really don't know exactly what your lineup is going to be. I mean, you know that Dylan Bell, if he can continue what he built off of at the tail end of last year, he's obviously going to be one of your guys. Dominic Lovett was a mainstay in the lineup last year. He's going to continue. Um, you're hoping that Ra Thomas can kind of form into what all the chatter was about him last year, about being this go-to X wide receiver, deep ball 50-50 guy that you can count on every single time down the field. And then you got a bunch of transfer guys. Arian Smith, of course, is in that mix as well. Anthony Evans, that was a hot name, one of the only freshmen really now on the squad from last year at the wide receiver position. So you have those guys. And then it's a bunch of transfer portal guys of like London Humphreys. He seems like a guy that's probably going to be getting an extended amount of playing time. Colby Young, though, is probably the one that I'm not alone on this. I know that everybody's kind of excited about just because he's built like a freak. He's built like a type of dude that you want at the X position, a guy that is going to excel if he is anything like everybody says he is going to be. But I think I'm just intrigued on that position alone just because they put a lot of assets into building depth at that position, specifically through the transfer portal. So I'm just kind of interested to see like what the lineup is, how are things shaking out, where they're using different players, and just kind of how they're using them. And that's more so what I'm interested in, just to kind of see how that all plays out. Because, like I said, I really don't know how that wide receiver room is going to play out right now.
Yeah, that room, I knew that was going to be your answer when I asked, because I think that is the other room that has got so much going on in it. I mean, it's the second year in a row that you go get at least two transfer wide receivers to come in and do it. So you still got those guys from last year, right? You got Ra Thomas and Dominic Lovett that are still there from last year's transfer portal that have a chance to do what they're going to do. You got Dylan Bell, you got Colby Young, you got London Humphrey, he's supposed to be kind of a freak as well. He's 6'3", and he's extremely quick. So it'll be interesting to see. I kind of assume he's going to be more in the slot type position, since you got, Colby probably at the X, and then you still got Dylan as well. So it'll be interesting to see how it all plays out. Georgia seems to be needing to go to the transfer portal 2 years in a row to really help that room, which is interesting. So I hope that Georgia's trying to do more in the recruiting side of wide receiver moving forward as well. I think they will. That seems to be a position that's kind of hurt them over the past couple years for recruiting purposes, so where you've needed to go to the transfer portal. So I'm kind of excited to see how those guys work out and what Georgia does moving forward. But Georgia hasn't really had your true X receiver in a while. Like it's been seasons, and now you've got Colby, who is going to be, he's built like it. He's got the speed. He's got the ability to just go up and get one. Kind of reminds you hopefully you've got a guy that, who was it? JT Daniels is saying, well, Pickens down there somewhere, I'm going to give him a chance kind of thing. Like if you've got a guy that can go up and just make plays and you have confidence that in those situations they can do it, I think that's a huge, boost to your offense. So I think he is the one that I'm most excited to see, just because Georgia hasn't had that true X receiver in so long.
Yeah, and I think they got quite like London Humphreys isn't just, and I think this is something a little bit unique to Georgia's situation. And I think a lot of programs do this now. Is like you don't necessarily just have one player and you say, well, you're only playing X, or like you're only playing in the slot. Georgia moved Ladd McConkey all around, and he's 5'11". He played X, and he was able to win at that position. I think Dylan Bell, he may not be the 6'6" freak that Colby Young is, but I think he's going to play a lot of X just because he is one of those playmakers. You get the ball in his hands, and he can do a lot of different things. So then they're going to be able to move around a lot of those guys, and I think that's a benefit to them this spring. Is like you don't have to just say, well, you're just an X receiver, so you're only getting reps here, unless your name is Ra Thomas. I think Ra Thomas is one of those players that's kind of just limited to being your X. I don't think you're really going to move him anywhere else. But a lot of these other guys, like Dominic Lovett, you could even say this to an extent, like he could be your Y or your Z. You can kind of move these guys around, and a lot of them will be able to get reps and kind of get some work in, especially just getting reps in with Carson Beck, which I'm sure that they've already done, making sure that you're accustomed to one another and getting that timing down. The wide receiver group definitely is one that's intriguing. It feels like we say that every year just because we kind of feel like we're going into another year of unknown with that position, because we don't have like a whole lot of consistency. It seems like there a whole lot.
Yeah, exactly. Over the past few seasons, that it's been a question going into each season that we've had, right? So this year, I'm excited because I feel like the cards are stacked in Carson's deck as far as the weapons that he has around him, and then we know now he's going into his second year as a full time starter, and his first time as a starter was a 4,000 yard guy. So the ceiling is really high for this Georgia offense with the
Mhm.
guys that are coming. It just depends on how much work they can get in this spring practice, how comfortable they can get with each other, and be able to go out there and just execute the game plan that Mike Bobo is going to have drawn up for him. I'm super excited for that room. One more room that I want to talk about on this roster is going to be that running back room. I feel like
Mhm.
there's a lot of question marks there as well. You went and got Trevor Etienne, who you assume has the chance to kind of take over that position group. That's why you went
He'll
and
be
got
your
him.
number one.
Yeah, he's going to be your number one guy. But then there's Georgia runs 2 to 3 guys, every game. So it's going to be interesting to see how those two, especially the 2 spot, because that one's going to get 10 carries a game as well as your number one. Because Georgia doesn't do the 20 carries per game, 30 carries per game
No.
type stuff. They get 10 to 15, and 15 is a high number usually. It's usually 10 to 12 carries for your guys at running back. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out because you've got Branson Robinson still coming off of his big injury. Roderick Robinson, who got some run late in the season last year, looked really, really good in the bowl game. You've got Andrew Paul. You've got all these guys that are just waiting for their chance to do something. And the door, I feel like, is wide open for Roderick to be able to go in and maybe make himself the number 2 guy because you still got Branson with injuries. You still got Andrew Paul that's been dealing with his injuries and trying to come back. And then
Mhm.
you still got Nate Frazier in that coming into that room who
Yeah,
is
he's one of
supposed
those
to be a
guys.
dude.
I don't know. I know that they said that they aren't sure if he's going to early enroll or not. He may not be here until the summer, but I think the last thing that I heard is that he may be able to get here in time for some spring practice. I'm
Okay.
not 100% sure on that, but I don't think he's on the early enrollees list right now. So that could play a factor in that. But absolutely, Nate
It does.
Frazier is definitely worth mentioning.
He's worth mentioning. I think he's going to compete in that room. I don't think he's going to be the number 2 guy, this season
Yeah.
kind of thing. I think that the door is or the stage is set for Roderick to be able to go in there and really solidify himself as one of the 1-2 punches that Georgia runs with all the time. And then maybe Nate Frazier can be that, change of pace guy coming in late, the, third down guy, or not third down guy, but the third running back in the room that gets some run. I think you also have to think about in that room, like I said, they don't get a lot of carries per guy. And then you still have Dylan Bell, who's probably going to line up back there a few times himself,
A good
and
chance.
get some carries because that's what Georgia did last year with them. They used him in so many ways. He's kind of your Swiss Army knife on that offense. Like you said, he's going to play multiple wide receiver positions, and he is going to line up at running back at times. So that running back room is extremely crowded, but some of the crowded guys there are injured. So it'll be interesting to see their bounce back going through spring and if they're ready to go in the fall as well. How much they've missed by being injured for as long as they have, especially with Branson. He's been dealing with his for a while now. And it's a hard injury to come back from. So
Oh,
I
for
really
sure.
want him to get back to 100% because I think he's one of those guys that can be just an absolute dude in that room. It's just
Mhm.
going to take him some time. When we got to see him in the Natty against TCU, I mean, he scored.
Those
Didn't he score
poor
2
guys.
touchdowns in that game?
Those poor TCU players.
Yeah, they like.
You're getting your butt whooped by 40 plus in the national championship. It's like, oh, here's 220-pound Branson Robinson fresh off the bench. Good luck, buddy. And it's just like, my God, that's just pure torture.
It
It's just,
was. Georgia was in there trying to prove a point, that
oh my
game. And they
gosh.
definitely did. But yeah, I can't imagine being in that game and you see Branson come out and it's like, oh, cool. At least we got
So
the, third or fourth
demoralizing.
string guy coming in. And then he's just running through you, scores 2 touchdowns and says, screw you
Jeez.
guys. Like it
Yeah,
was, but yeah, that room
that
it's
pretty
got a
much
lot going on
summarizes.
there.
Yeah, that pretty much summarized that game in a nutshell. Yeah, running
Did.
back room definitely worth mentioning. Like you said, I mean, Etienne's your headliner, and then it's kind of like a hodgepodge of names that could be that number 2 guy until Branson's really healthy. He seems like he'll take over that number 2 spot once he
I
is
think so.
healthy. But a good name, a good amount of names that are mixed into that room that could potentially be that number 2 option until, like I said, 22 is healthy and good to go. I'm going to mention one specific player, and then I'll hit on my last position group. I think Gunnar Stockton, this is a massive spring for him. I know we got to see him a little bit in the bowl game last year, and he looked pretty good. I'm not going to say he looked great, but I think Gunnar Stockton looked pretty good, knowing that that was really his first legitimate action in college football. Now, it may have been against Florida State's 2024 roster, not against their 2023 roster, but he got some in-game action. That was really his first time. It was the first time ever in his career that he was QB2 because Brock Vandagriff had entered the portal at that point, no longer on the roster. So I think this is a big spring for him because I mean, you have three scholarship quarterbacks on the roster: Carson Beck, Gunnar Stockton, and now Ryan Puglisi. But I mean, if God forbid anything happens to Carson Beck and you got to call upon Gunnar Stockton, it'd be nice to know by the end of G-Day this year that we know that Gunnar Stockton has progressed in his game. He looks cleaner than he did in the Orange Bowl against Florida State. And he just looks like a guy that if you need to roll him out there in the mid-season or wherever you need to put him at, that he could go out there and get the job done for you. So I think it's a massive spring for him, not only for that, but also for heading into the next season when it is going to be him and Puglisi and whoever in the 2025 class is going to be battling it out, because he needs to have that confidence in himself and have that reassurance in himself that going into next year, it is Gunnar Stockton's job to lose. Just like when it was Carson Beck's turn, it was Carson Beck's job to lose. So I think it's a big spring for him just to kind of gain some of that confidence and gain some reassurances for himself going into this season and the next season. But the final position group I'll hit on, I think this is another one that a lot of people kind of feel the same about, is the defensive line. You got two key returnees. I think Warren Brinson and Nazir Stackhouse, those are two big names coming back this year. I think both of them have room to grow. Obviously, I think that's one of the reasons why they elected to come back. I think Warren Brinson has a tremendous opportunity to be one of these guys at the defensive line room. I think we saw flashes of it last year. He just kind of lacked the ability to finish the drill, get guys down.
He's just got to learn how to finish, and he'd be a 7-sack guy if he could learn how to finish the play.
If he could just get him down on the ground, that man would have had 10 tackles for loss or however many last year. So I think he has huge opportunity to become that this year. If he can just learn to kind of unzip his feet a little bit, wrap guys up and get them down on the ground. So those two guys, obviously, getting them back is huge. But I think there's a lot of names behind them. Obviously, other guys are going to start. I think the biggest transition is that Michael Williams moving to Jack. Yeah, I think that could do wonders for himself and for this position group as well. But Damon Wilson, obviously, behind him. Simon Pimba, that's a guy that I think a lot of people are excited about heading into year two. I mean, just a massive human being. And he kind of had to take some time to learn the position a little bit at the collegiate level. And he was really learning it at the tail end of his high school level as well. But really kind of finding out his technique and everything like that. I think year two could be a big year for him. So Damon Wilson, Simon Pimba, two guys that I would specifically be watching. And then that interior defensive line, I think you got three names that you can really harp on. I think Jamal Jarrett, that's obviously one of them. Kristen Miller, I think that's one that people kind of continue to forget about just a little bit. I think he was tremendous last year for Georgia and the limited number of opportunities that he got. But I think he's a true wrecker in the run defense. I think he's a true wrecker on the interior level. And I think going into year three, I mean, that's money-making year. So I think it could be a massive year for 52. And then Jordan Hall, he got playing time last year. So I think if you can get Stackhouse and you can get Warren Brinson playing at the level that they need to be in their final years of the college career,
and the level that they're capable of playing at.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like they are capable.
And then also
you
can get Hall, Miller, and Jarrett taking that next leap as well and elevating their game. And then, of course, you can't go without mentioning him. I think this is a guy also. I mean, heck, I just kind of slept on him myself right here. But I think he could be another record is TID, Tyron Ingram Dawkins. Yep. I mean, that's another big name that Georgia got back. I know he has a foot injury right now. I don't know if he's out of the boot yet and if he's going to be able to practice this spring, but he's certainly going to be a massive contributor. And then Zaire McLeod, I think it sounds like he's going to get playing time his first year after transferring to South Carolina this offseason. So I think you got some help and you got a lot of players that are looking to take that step forward. So, I mean, the defensive line room last year was already good, but I think it has the potential to take that step forward and be great like they were the previous two seasons when they had some studs in that room.
Yeah, it's hard to replace the guy. Like, I think that's where everyone looks at the defensive line room like last year and then going into this year being like, it's kind of a down time for us, but it's going back to what you were saying earlier about comparing people to Caleb Downs or comparing people to, to those guys, right? Like and tight end Brock Bowers, like it's kind of an unfair comparison. We're talking about Jordan Davis, Devontae Wyatt, like those guys were, I mean, they were dudes, right? So like it's really, really hard to just
top 6 UJ all time interior defensive lineman.
Yeah, so it's really, really hard to hold them to that standard, but that's the standard that has been set. That position group prior to those guys hadn't had somebody even get drafted in so long, right? Like they were just abysmal over the years. And so now all of a sudden you've got these big names that just left. And so you're excited about it again and you want to see them do the same kind of thing. And so the stage gets set kind of high, or the bar gets set kind of high for them. So it's a little unfair in that aspect. But like you were talking about with Warren Warren was in the backfield so much last year.
Mm-hmm.
He just couldn't get his feet unzipped and make the play. So if he works on that part this offseason, he has the opportunity to really, really wreak havoc in the backfield. Like Dan's asking about, the run defense. He can be a huge contributor to the run defense because if he can get pressure through like he did last year and actually make the tackle or push them outside where now you have Michael Williams flying off the edge, being that edge rusher, it's going to be incredible opportunity for that run defense to step up big this year. And then those big names behind him, I'm a huge fan of Jordan Hall. He did get some play last year. I think he's going to be able to elevate himself again this year. Obviously, there's a lot of competition in front of him and some guys that he's not going to be your starter by any means, but Georgia does like to rotate that position. So guys like Christian Miller and Jordan Hall and Jarrett, those guys are going to get on the field because they're going to rotate them in on different down situations and I think this room has the chance to be a lot better than it was last year. I agree with you on that.
Yeah, and there's some people that believe that. I think it was this year when I was reading about the people were kind of already doing projections for the 2025 class, draft class, and a few Georgia they did it by position. When I read about Nazir Stackhouse, there's people that believe that he's a top 60 pick, top first round pick, like that's his potential. So if you can tap into that for Nazir Stackhouse, then by all means, they're going to be A-okay. I will say I'll note one freshman in this group. I think if there is going to be one, I think he's going to be the one that ends up playing. And he's going to be the guy that everybody talks about this year, and that's Jordan Thomas. I think Jordan Thomas has potential. This is one of Brooks's my guys, so I'm kind of stealing his thunder a little bit on this one. But I'm going to cheat. He's not here on this show with me, so I'm going to cheat a little bit. But Jordan Thomas, I think that he is an opportunity to be one of those freaks. One of the names that you just mentioned of in that realm of guys. You want to talk about top all-time defensive lineman. I think he has potential to be that special and that much of a difference maker. So if there is a freshman that I would pick up the bunch to really impact that defensive line room, it is Jordan Thomas for sure.
And see, but that just goes into the conversation of what we were just talking about with those guys being so good. It's so hard to get that back. But Georgia is, I think the biggest thing that's helped Georgia there is by having those guys. Now people don't have that negative recruiting tactic against you that they were using. It came out teams were telling kids this. They don't get you drafted at this position. Yeah. You will not go to the NFL at this position if you go to Georgia. Well, now they showed they could get multiple first-round guys, at 3 guys in the first round at that position now in the past, 2 years? So that's over with. So now you can actually recruit the high-level guys to be able to keep getting them rolling in and have those more often than not now. So getting Jordan Davis, which he was a 3-star. We all know that. He ended up being who he was, but he was a 3-star. He was slept on coming out of high school and turned into that. So you can still find those guys, at 3 or 4 stars, that not necessarily your 5-star guy, but now you can actually go out and get the big names because you have the track record showing, hey, they can't say we can't do this anymore. We've had 3 guys go in the first round now in 2 years. So we'll get you where you need to go if you come here.
For sure. Yeah, a lot of different stuff to be excited about. I think you could pinpoint and highlight anything for any position group. I think offensive line is a little intriguing just because it's not necessarily about question marks that you have, but it's more so about who the heck are you going to play? Is Xavier Truss going to be one of your starters, or are you going to roll with Dylan Fairchild and Micah Morris as your rotation there, and then you're going to play are you going to play Monroe Freeling at right tackle? There's a lot of good questions in that offensive line room. It's definitely not a lack of talent, but it's just more so about who the heck are you going to go with? Stacey Searles. That's a big job ahead of him this spring, is just kind of figuring out what the heck are we going to do here? Because we got a good problem to have, and we got too many guys that we got to play. But other than that, again, anytime when spring football rolls around, just more so excitement than ever.
It's super fun to actually be able to talk real football again coming up. We've been the off-season content, as it's been harder to get stuff going, and our schedules have been hard and stuff like that. But now that we're getting into we got spring practice going, we're going to have so much more to talk about every single time. And then we're going to get into our dead period again moving forward once we get into the summer. But at least for the next month and a half, we've got some solid content to bring you guys. And I'm excited about it. I know, obviously, we're doing the show on Sunday today. We won't be doing a show this Wednesday. I'll be in Texas for work myself, so be out of town. And I will probably try to do one again next Sunday as well when I get home. So as long as everything's good on schedules, we'll play it by ear. But I'm excited to see how spring ball goes this week. I know Jonathan is. We got the pro day coming up on Wednesday. Jonathan, you got anything else, or You ready to wrap this boy up?
No, man, I'm good. Again, I'm just always glad I get to hop on here, do a little bit more Georgia football talking. I know I get to do it 3 other times throughout the week on my other show with Christian and Brooks, but I always enjoy getting to do it on here as well and get to chop it up with the OG podcaster, co-host of mine. So I always enjoy getting to hop on here.
Yeah, don't ever forget me while you're getting famous on the other side, all right?
Oh, I never could. And if I do, you have permission to slap me. I'll go ahead and tell you that right now.
Y'all heard
but
that.
Anyways,
remember that.
Do what the little banner down here says right now. If you haven't already, like and subscribe. We're still creeping up on that subscriber count. I can't exactly. Are we near 500 or is it more or less?
We're about 15 away, I think, somewhere around there.
About 15 away. So help us reach that goal, that off-season goal of ours. That'd be massive for us. So again, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. Share with your friends and family. Bring new people to the Classic City Podcast family. If you follow us on Twitter, you saw today that you got an alert. Like, oh, they're going at 1 p.m. today. They're not going at their typical 8 p.m. time on Sunday, and they're not going on Wednesday this week. So hit up all the socials right there, the Stodfather, Classic City Pod, and Dr_Jabo. You can find all of your schedule announcement needs and any other humorous content that you might want on your Twitter timeline. You can find it at those locations. But other than that, we appreciate you guys for tuning in today. Stoddard, you can close us out.
As always, keep it classy in the Classic City. We will see you next week.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of Classic City Sports. Take a second to subscribe, rate, review, and share with your friends and family. Feel free to reach out to the Classic City Sports Crew on Twitter with any topics you'd like discussed. You can reach out to Jeremiah at the Stodfather, to Jonathan at Dr_J Will, and make sure to follow at Classic City Pod for show updates. Check back next week for a brand new episode. In the meantime,
2 simple words which express the sentiments of the entire Bulldog Nation.